Okay, without further ado, let's get in to the news for the past 7 days. We always start with Copilot. Copilot is governed by Microsoft. So sometimes we think maybe we're being funneled to see things. Okay, a quick sweep of the past week. Major UK news stories. Mandelson, the Epstein fallout intensifies. UK government referred material related to former Minister Peter Mandelson Epstein-linked emails to police. So this has been all over the news. The Epstein files have been all over the news. I purposely haven't really brought that up as part of the news, even though I knew it was coming out, because I wasn't sure how much would be UK related. And the thing that I find really interesting about the Epstein files, and I've heard this from other people who have commented on different social media platforms, is the names that they've given us are roughly the names that we kind of knew were probably in the Epstein files anyway, like Andrew and Mandelson. But what they've done is they've released the files and they've released a little bit more of the depravity that went with it. So they haven't given us any real names that we didn't think were already in the Epstein files. And I had a conversation with someone where we sat and I said, well, I think that's possibly because the people that they haven't revealed as being part of the files are still useful to them, whereas the people that have been revealed are no longer serving a purpose. So it's okay to release them. And I put Donald Trump in that place as well. I mean, my prediction is that Donald Trump will not be in office very much longer. I think that this is the beginning of the end for him. But I also think that the people they haven't released names of are still very useful to whoever holds the information, because that's, again, a form of blackmail, isn't it? So having released some, they'll be able to turn around to the people who haven't been released that know that they're in the files and say, well, you know, you toe the line or this will happen to you. So that's my idea of it. I might not be close to the truth, but I think I might be. I might not be, but I think I could be. Okay, so multiple outlets reported political pressure, calls for transparency and questions over national security implications. It's very interesting that the UK government are looking at the national security implications over Mandelson's involvement in the Epstein files and not actually looking at any form of the depravity that was part of the Epstein files. But that's our government for you. The Times highlighted leaked emails and concerns about misconduct investigations. So we knew that Epstein was going to come up. We knew it would come up. Okay, UK-China relations take centre stage. Prime Minister and senior ministers visited China, focusing on economic cooperation and trade. Reports included meeting in Shanghai, trade concessions, and political analysis of the visit's implications. There was a lot of uproar on social media this week about Starmer going over to China, especially in light of this digital ID and the control that the government are trying to exert over the British people at the moment, because China has total control over its population. They have the facial recognition. Everybody is known in China. And they have, as far as I'm aware, they have a form of CBDC, and digital ID. So it's, when we spoke about China and we had in the news that China were opening a super embassy in London, I said at the time, well, we could probably learn a few things from China because they do take care of their population quite well. I didn't mean go over and see how we can be kind of geo-fenced into our cities just like they do in China. That wasn't what I meant. That wasn't my intention when I said, oh, we could learn a few things. We could learn a few things from China because they invest back in their population, whereas it doesn't seem that our government invests back into our population in the UK at all. But yeah, I didn't mean bringing stricter legislation that we would all be kind of fenced in. Okay, environmental concerns, severe flood impacts in the UK. This has been a recurring theme since the beginning of the year. Expert warns of apocalyptic consequences for wildlife, including birds, butterflies, and dormice, due to recent UK flooding. Okay. One of my main concerns when it comes to reading about flooding and things like that is we have a great tendency in this country to, oh, there's a big tree there, let's upend that and let's build something on that land. Trees have an enormous uptake of water. And when we take trees away, there are consequences to that. So land that possibly didn't flood before is now flooding with the amount of rain we're getting. Could be something to consider. Maybe we should start planting more trees rather than taking them away. Get more green areas where the uptake of the excess water is taken up by the trees. But for now, it looks like it could be, I mean, I'm not sure apocalyptic is a good word to be using for it. Okay, royal family headlines. Prince Harry's potential return to the UK amid ongoing legal battles with tabloid draws attention. Well, we had him about a month ago where he'd come back to sit in the hearings of there were the newspapers that had been hounding him and hounding Meghan, and it was a case that went back a long time ago. And he was here specifically to give evidence at those cases, and evidently his evidence was very emotional. He was very emotional about that. So Prince Edward commented publicly following the release of the Epstein files. Well, that would be interesting to look into, see whether he has anything to say about his brother being part of the scandal. Okay, crime and public safety. A 50-year-old woman was fatally stabbed in a busy area of North London. Oh, well, that's tragic. Fatally stabbed assumes that she died. So condolences and love to anybody in her family. A father and son were involved in a chase that resulted in the death of a 4-year-old child. Oh, equally tragic. Okay. A 13-year-old boy was arrested after a pregnant woman was hit by an e-bike and gave birth. Wow. Okay, so that's the crime and public safety. Transport and infrastructure. 2 more UK train companies were brought into public ownership. Smart motorway systems were reported as not working on the day of a major incident. Well, that's not very good. I think the UK train companies being brought into public ownership, good. Smart motorway systems not working, not so good. Cost of living and consumer updates. A new fuel finder scheme launched to help drivers locate cheaper petrol prices. Well, that's got to be good, hasn't it? I'm sure they have, for the electric cars, I'm sure they have a electric finder for you to be able to charge your car. So yeah, it's good that we can source cheaper petrol. However, if it's going to cost more petrol to get there, you'd have to tally up whether your local petrol station, maybe being a couple of pence dearer, is actually working out cheaper if you have to travel in your car to get to the cheaper petrol station. So that would have to be weighed up. Energy and business. Octopus Energy announced a joint venture with a Chinese counterpart. Okay. I'm not really sure what that would be about. I know a few people who've got Octopus Energy, but I don't personally. I don't have that. And I haven't heard anything about it. So that is from Copilot. And there's not really anything health and well-being wise that I would feel the need to dive into. The crime and public safety stuff, we've said before, I mean, it's really quite concerning when people are being stabbed in the street, but we don't have any background on that. I can look at the Metro and find out there's the links there. I could look at the Metro and find out what the background story is and about the father and son involved in the chase. I mean, tragic stuff. Okay, so that's Copilot. And as always, we go to Claude and we'll ask Claude exactly the same question. Claude sometimes takes a little bit longer because Claude has a tendency to really comb through lots of different places for the news. There we say, let me search for a specific recent UK news stories and let me get more specific news stories. Okay, so according to Claude, the weather's number one. Okay. Northern Ireland experienced its wettest January in 149 years, with the UK overall seeing above average rainfall due to a series of Atlantic low pressure systems. Storms Goretti, Ingrid, and Chandra brought saturated ground, flooding, and unsettled conditions throughout January. So we've had three storms throughout January: Goretti, Ingrid, and Chandra. Okay, well, we've discussed that. Like I say, I think we should have more. We should leave trees where they are when they're fully grown and uptaking the flood waters. Okay, Palestine Action activists acquitted. I am incredibly pleased that this has happened. They're out of I think there's 24 activists that are going up in court, and I think it was 6 that have been acquitted. So yes, I was right. 6 Palestine Action activists were cleared of aggravated burglary after a break-in at the UK headquarters of an Israeli-owned arms company. This was a significant legal outcome following the group's proscription as terrorist organisation. And that was as part of a hearing where a jury was involved, and we'll go into juries later. As part of the Research Hub, I'm looking at the fact that Starmer would love to stop jury trials. I think if Starmer had had his way, there would have been no jury for these people, and they would have been judged by the judge. And the judge was swapped out at the last moment. And effectively, it was thought that possibly the original judge that was sitting on the case would have been quite amenable to finding them not guilty. So they swapped out the judge. I mean, this isn't gospel truth. I mean, you could probably say, oh, no, that's not why they did it. But it seemed very suspicious that they swapped out the judge at the last minute in the hopes of getting some form of charge that would stick and that he would agree with. But the jury turned around and said, no. As far as we're concerned, they were doing what they felt was right. But I'll bring you more on that later. Parliament and government. The government announced changes to inheritance tax reforms for farmers, increasing the threshold from 1 million to 2.5 million. MPs endorsed Emma Douglas for the role of chair of the pensions regulator. Well, we've had that before. Maybe it's been confirmed now. We know that the farmers had been in uproar and they had been petitioning government, and they had brought their tractors into London, and they'd done quite a few protests. However, from what I can remember, the last protest that the farmers tried to do in London, they were stopped. The police stopped them, told them they couldn't come through, even though it was a peaceful protest. So I don't know how well that will sit with the farmers from a 1 million to 2.5 million. I'm sure there'll be some backlash about it. Economy and markets. The FTSE broke through the 10,000 level for the first time since launching in 1984. Now, we have had this as well again. Economic forecasters are predicting slower growth for 2026 amid concerns about unemployment and business costs. I really don't follow the stocks. Political developments. Robert Jenrick's political move has all but ended the chances of any deal to unite the British right between Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage. You know my views. As always, doesn't matter who's in charge. They have to bow down to the global overlords. Okay, upcoming events. Multiple protests are scheduled for January the 31st in London, including a UKIP march and a Palestine coalition demonstration, with police imposing conditions to prevent disorder. Okay, so, multiple protests are scheduled for the 31st. So a UKIP march and a Palestine coalition demonstration. I wonder what the conditions will be that are going to be imposed to prevent disorder. Because if it's anything like the problems we've seen when there have been protests and marches, and when we brought the march on the prison last week to you, and I told you that it was a peaceful march until the police turned up, and they actually made it very difficult. And when they arrested people, they were really very forceful. And this seems to be a growing theme in our police force, that the police are becoming increasingly almost inciting agitation. So it'll be interesting to see. Okay. So that's it from Claude. Again, not really very much that I would dive into from a health and well-being point of view. Weather. Okay. Now, as always, we go to Grok. And we ask Grok exactly the same question. Grok is part of X. So it's governed really by Elon Musk. Okay. Prime Minister Keir Starmer expressed regret over appointing Peter Mandelson as UK ambassador to Washington, accusing him of repeatedly lying about his ongoing ties to Jeffrey Epstein after Epstein's conviction. Mandelson has resigned from the House of Lords amid the revelations. Rightly so. I think if he hadn't have resigned from the House of Lords, I think he would have been told that he was no longer welcome. I think Keir Starmer's guffawing about this and it's terrible. He should have told us that we knew about Peter Mandelson before. We knew that he was part of the Epstein files because he was one of the names that had been dropped. So for Keir Starmer to express his regret now seems a bit like shutting the door after the horse has bolted, really. Police are investigating allegations that Mandelson leaked confidential government documents to Epstein. The Met Police requested withholding some sensitive documents, but after backlash from Labour MPs, the government approved their release with redactions to a Parliamentary Security Committee for review. See, we have the DSMA in place in the UK so that the mainstream media can't leak any important information to us. So where does that come in when it comes to MPs leaking important information? Obviously, it's covert. They've done it covertly. I presume Mandelson did it covertly, so they weren't aware. But they're worried about what we might find out. Maybe they should be more concerned about what our MPs are telling other people. Related Epstein file releases have prompted new claims, including emails and legal letters alleging involvement of others, e.g., requests for sex acts from an exotic dancer at Epstein's home. And like I said, a lot of the names that we have that have come out in the Epstein files were people that we already knew would be part of the Epstein files, and requests, the information that is coming through about these people just kind of shows the level of depravity that some people will go to. Okay, so this has created significant pressure on Starmer, as if he wasn't under pressure enough, with Labour MPs expressing anger and calls for transparency on vetting processes. Much like Donald Trump, I would hazard a guess that our Mr. Starmer possibly won't be our Prime Minister for very much longer. It's not a prediction, it's just a guess. But that's what I think is going to happen. Heads have got to roll, really, for what we're finding out, not just about the Epstein files, but everything else that's been going on. Okay, Prince Andrew developments. Oh, that's interesting. He called him Prince Andrew. Following fresh Epstein-related revelations, including an email appearing to confirm a controversial photo with Virginia Giuffre is real, and new allegations being accessed by police or assessed by police, the former prince has left his Royal Lodge home in Windsor and relocated to a temporary property on the Sandringham estate. So he's still within royal confines when it comes to his property and where he's living. When we saw that documentary where he was sitting with the lady and he was talking about all of this and tried to brush it all under the carpet as a big misunderstanding, we knew then. Health and National Health Service cancer pledges. The government announced ambitious plans aiming for 3/4 of cancer patients in England to survive by 2035, focusing on earlier diagnosis and faster treatment, though experts highlight concerns over staffing shortages. I had seen something about this. And when it comes to patients on the National Health Service and then wanting to focus on earlier diagnosis and faster treatment, I appreciate that. However, that early diagnosis, it comes from, I think they're sending out things like kits for you to be able to test yourself at home and send them your feces for a start. So if you want to check for bowel cancer, and various other types of kits that you can use at home and send them off. And yes, I think that will bring earlier diagnosis, possibly, and faster treatment, maybe. But there are huge backlogs still when it comes to the National Health Service. And I've done, because this has come up in the news for me a little bit over the last few weeks, I've done a bit of a dive into the fact that Keir Starmer said to everybody that, oh, we've cut the National Health Service waiting lists. From my investigation so far, and I'm not going to bring it to you yet because I'm still investigating further. I want to make sure I corroborate what I find before I bring it to you. From what I've found so far, the figures have been altered, not dropped. That's about the only tidbit that I can give you at the moment. It's a little bit like when government turn around and say, oh, the figures for income support have dropped. The amount of people on income support have dropped. And it's like, well, actually, no, they haven't dropped. What's happened is you've taken loads of people off of income support and put them onto universal credit. So the offset of the income support figures dropping is the fact that you've placed them onto the universal credit figures. So universal credit figures have increased. It feels a little bit like that at the moment with what I'm investigating, but I will bring it to you. I will, once I've got to the bottom of it, I will bring it to you. Okay. Crime incidents. A murder investigation was launched after a De Montfort University student was stabbed to death in Leicester, with an 18-year-old arrested. Separate arrests followed in an XL bully dog attack that killed a baby on suspicion of perverting justice. Oh, tragic, tragic. Oh, it's interesting that they name the breed of the dog. There was a big push at one point that certain dogs shouldn't be bred, shouldn't be kept. Maybe that's another nod to having a kind of breed of dog taken out of our society. But I'll have a short look into it. I won't deep dive. Other notable items. Warning about the court system being on the brink of collapse, with calls for more remote hearings, junior doctors voting to continue strike action, and reports of gangs using drones to smuggle drugs and weapons into prison. Dear. Oh dear. Well, one thing I would say about the drone side of things, surely it's not so bad to smuggle drugs when we know drones are used to bomb people. So they're not trying to help people escape. Maybe they're not that I condone sending drugs into prison, but just makes me giggle a little bit that they're using it for that. Okay, the court system being on the brink of collapse. We'll have more on that. Because I've got research to show you about our court system being on the brink of collapse. And the junior doctors voting to continue the strike action, well, they obviously haven't received the confirmation of what they wanted, because we had the strike action last week and Keir Starmer turning around and saying, oh, it's terrible. It's outrageous that the doctors are striking. Well, why would they be striking, Keir? Why would they be striking, Mr. Starmer? Tell us that. What are their demands? What are they after? And what do they want? And until that's rectified, they're going to continue to strike. So these reflect the key priorities in UK mainstream coverage right now, with heavy emphasis on political accountability. Yup. The Royal Epstein fallout and public service challenges. Okay, so that is the news for this week.